Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. I'm just laughing because last minute, Cindy, I'm telling you, I'm trying to get in here before midnight. Did it by the skin of my teeth. But it isn't, right? What I'm doing in the moment and not wanting to pull myself out of it. Little bit of is that little bit of hesitancy in what are we going to bring to the table tonight, right? And then I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to pull a card, right? I didn't have a topic in mind. We're going to pull a card and I'm going to mess up my deck of cards. And if you don't know, I have a deck of cards. They're 54 powerful words. They're just powerful words, and they've helped me out so much in the past. Well, it's been about a year and a half now, hasn't it? I spent over a year uh, putting this deck of cards together. They're not tarot cards or anything like that, just powerful words, right? But each day each week of the year, it was last year, I guess, and I completed them at the end of September. And for a whole week, I would delve into one word and I would look at that word in different perspectives, in different circumstances, maybe a different experience of mine, maybe an experience of somebody else. Maybe it was a question that I had and maybe did some Googling on it and I learnt by it, was inspired by it. And every day, and I show up here 5 days a week, show up 6 days a week, but I have a different show, and that's on Sunday night. If you guys want to come in and hang out with a great crew, I have a great crew. They yap more than I do, but that's Sunday night, and that is Chatters Live if you want to come in on Sunday. But 5 days a week, I do What's My Good Cheer. But in between, I am doing projects, right? I am deep in the lesson. I am always moving forward, always expanding, and I'm always practicing my craft in residency of, whoever I am, because I'm always growing. I'm always changing. And I believe that, one of the big reasons that I was invited to this party was the fact that I was willing to change. I was willing to change perspectives. And a lot of these perspectives were things that I grew up with, understandings that I grew up with, things that I believed were truths for myself. Sorry, I just took my vitamins. Just truths that were not really mine, but because I grew up with them, they just became believable. They just became truths on their own. I've been in this new understandings for probably a half a dozen years now, where I'm actually been aware of what I was doing. I believe it's been going on for a few years prior to that without my knowledge. But, in those half a dozen years and realizing how badly I personally messed up in not trusting myself, not moving with my own intuition, not building on my own beliefs, but carrying on in those beliefs that I learned as a child, teenager, young adult. And they were so compounded that, it's something. One of the content creators that I really enjoy following, his name is Sam Vatkin. He's actually a self-proclaimed narcissist. He was actually diagnosed with narcissism, and but he was so truthful, and I resonated with him so much that I delved into his content because I wanted to understand emotions. If you guys have never popped into one of my lives before, I am Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and especially I love delving into the inside, not just because it's helped to resolve so many misunderstandings, so many of what I thought were truths, but right in that span of 6 years that I've been able to delve in deep in picking up some understandings that not would just serve me, but that I could kind of serve in my brand and have that served as actual truths, right? Because I had grown up in so many untruths. And I'm not going to say lies because a lot of it is misunderstandings. A lot of it is just passed down from generation to generation. And we're just not talking about understandings, but even in our bad habits, our addictions, our religions, our political ideas, even sometimes in the importance of some aspects of life that are important to others, but in our families didn't seem. If you were a farmer, education was not as important because, the fathers wanted their sons out in the fields helping out. And my mother was somebody who was brought up on the farm, and she only made it to the seventh grade before she pulled out of school. Now, you can't get pulled out of school at the seventh grade nowadays, right? Right? You're expected to stay in school to at least grade 10 before it's acceptable to leave. For myself, I stayed in school right till I graduated, in grade 12. But, I didn't feel that need to carry on in my education. By that time, those untruths were so compounded into me. I felt like I really didn't have anything to offer, that I would be lucky to get a job at McDonald's or 7-Eleven. I did work at 7-Eleven. I never worked at McDonald's. But you know what? Those people who work at McDonald's are hard workers and they have discipline. And that's a hard job. And especially if you're going into a job like that for minimum wage, to be able to pick up some of those skills, you know, sometimes we should just be grateful for the experiences. And, in lots of my jobs, even though I didn't care for them, even though I thought they were hard, that maybe, right, they weren't fun, that I didn't want to stick in them for a career, even so, I learned so much from each and every job. And each and every one of those jobs is tagged on as experience. And if they're different jobs for me, every job seemed a little bit different. Mind you, I did stay in hospitality, I would say, for probably 2 decades of my working career. The rest of it was a lot of customer service. I always loved working with the public. I never wanted to be in the background. And I had a couple of those jobs too. They weren't fun. And in truth, I don't believe I learned anything from those jobs because you're not really interacting with anybody else. And at the same time, there isn't any varying in those jobs. You're learning one specific chore and that's your chore, right? That's why I love customer service and why I loved hospitality, is because of the experiences. And in living vicariously, which is something I've always done my entire life, living vicariously through other people rather than living through my own life, I found people so interesting. And I learned very early that it took all kinds to make the world, which leads us into our powerful word tonight. I didn't want to shuffle through my cards again. It's a project I'm working in. And if I mix those cards up, I'm going to lose track of where I'm at. But when I was working on the projects of first getting those cards ready, I wrote the words down, right? And I had them in this book and also in references because, I didn't want to copy other people's quotes, other people's ideas. Though I did a little bit of Googling, I also delved into other people's content to see what I resonated with. And I picked it, I picked through it and I analyzed it. And, when you go 5 days on the same word, right? I took those perceptions, all those perceptions is the learning process in searching out that word to find a base where I actually had a perspective on the word myself. Now, because I understood, because I was in hospitality, because I lived vicariously through my friends and my acquaintances and my customers, that I had a pretty good idea that we were all meant to be different, that we were all meant to bring special to the table, but not everybody brought it to the table. Like everybody was a unique, but not everybody had that interest in rubbing with other people, right? For myself, I loved it, right? I loved it. I felt like I was learning in that process. I wasn't woke up to any of these ideas at the time. But at the same time, I found it curious as to why people were the way they were in comparison to the person that I was. And, I knew even then it was in my upbringing and it was in those passed down traditions and culture and, right, dynamic personalities that we all pick up little bits and pieces. And we do it naturally without even realizing, this is where this saying of, you're going to grow up to be just like your mother, or you're going to grow up to be just like your father. But that's not actually true because for myself, I picked up the best of each side. And, there were understandings on both sides. There were experiences on both sides. And there were things that I resonated as truth on each side. And I rejected whatever didn't feel right to me, whatever didn't feel like a truth for me. And I did this fairly early. It happened because of my, I have to say, traumatic experiences as a child and in my own hypervigilance and being very empathic. I was very, right, paying attention. Again, it's one of those things that I appreciated in working in hospitality and working in retail and in that customer service that comes from my hypervigilance in wanting to know to better present myself to the world, because this is what empaths do, is we suit our personas and the way we live to accommodate others. And, in the past half a dozen years, I've come to recognize that I could be myself. And so some of those ideas of picking and choosing in my parentage, what I wanted to be a part of my culture, part of my traditions, and I did that and I rejected the rest. Like I said, I rejected the rest. And I felt guilt and shame in that because in rejecting that, I was rejecting, right, people that I cared for and people that maybe I had those volatile experiences with. And it makes sense to reject that pain, but there were lessons in those pains. And even if I didn't want to be a part of it, that I didn't want it to be a part of me, I was in it and it was passed down from one generation to the next. And by the time it got to me and right in my age, it was so compounded, right? I had a little bit of work to do. And in that little bit of work, I was able to understand that it was okay to be assimilated. And this is the word that I picked today, right? Assimilation, that accumulation of all different parts to make the whole, which was me. And each one of us has that option, that choice to do exactly that for themselves, right? And maybe it will do you good. Maybe, we are so compounded in our ideas that we're not willing, right, to remove those bricks, to break down what we have, right, held up for probably our entire lives, right? But you know what? This world is changing and it's changing uh, so drastically and so perfectly in its rhythm that for a lot of us, we're not understanding that we are, right, stepping into something different, right? We are this close to each other. No matter where we are in the world, we're this close to each other. And we are rubbing shoulders with people across the world. And we're judging ourselves and our contribution as to what's going on the other side. And we're making it like it's ours that, that, oh my goodness, shame on me. There are people starving in Somalia or whatever it is, people are being persecuted in the Ukraine and this country's not getting along with this country. And we start blaming ourselves for that, right? And especially if you have two parents, right, that are maybe in the old world, if you're from North America, right, from your parents' motherland, that they come from two different countries. And then, right, they get together and they have you, and you have two different people who are your parents, and they have different perspectives. These were my parents. My mother loved Jesus, right? She didn't have a hold on to one denomination, right? But she loved Jesus and she tried them all out. My father swung in the spiritual aspect. And I have to say, I didn't take either side. I did go to Sunday school, right? As kids, we all went to church. My father was spiritual. He never stepped foot in church after the day he got married. But he had his own ideas. And I don't think he shared those ideas. Like, I only recognized that he was a spiritual person after I had my own experiences, right? And then it just hit me like a brick, and I went, oh my goodness, that only happened because I rejected the pain. I rejected the source of that pain. And even though I took lessons and they got compounded, in that work that I did for myself and in that understanding that I could pick and choose for myself what is true for me, right? Of course, I went with what I loved. Of course, I went with what loved me. And I resonated with my father, even not understanding he was a spiritual person and really what that meant, right? I know he did a little bit of, what's it called? Um, Hubbard, right? It's Scientology. I remember his books. I remember, his stoicism, hit the mindset, Bob Proctor, and right, it hit me, but it didn't hit me until I was well into my 50s, and then I understood, right, that this is where I was meant to sit because that's what I resonated with. And when I say my dad didn't share in his understandings with us, he may have done it in a indirect way because, right, we grew up on quotes. My dad loved quotes, right? And we talked a little bit yesterday. I wrote a post on my community page. It was on Turn the Other Cheek, and I wrote a little article on that if you want to go and check that out. Give me your opinion and your thoughts on it because, again, that's my perspective. And it wasn't always a perspective because, it was something. It was one of those untruths that I grew up believing was a truth. And again, it took some time to untangle those wires, to better understand, to build my own perspectives. But when I did, I understood that it was okay to have an accumulation of perspectives from both sides, right? From both sides. Hello, Eugene. I'm very good tonight. Thank you for asking. I hope your night is going. I so appreciate your company. Eugene's here every night. He's so sweet. I really appreciate that. But the word we have tonight is synthesis. Last night, when I was yapping, and the word that I had yesterday was it willingness? Hmm. I have to go back in. I have to go back in and check what it was. But I remember in referencing uh, my life that I talked a little bit about um, um, this quote of it takes all kinds to make the world, and it's not my quote. It actually comes from a little 16-year-old kid that I worked with in a retail lumber store. And you know what? It's a truth. It does take all kinds to make the world. But sometimes in our beliefs and traditions and our cultures, we don't rub with those other cultures, right? We don't run with those other beliefs. It was only in the grace of my dad's choices that, I had that opportunity to see different perspectives. And because, right, I didn't understand it, that of course, like I said, I went with what was comfortable. And as much as I resonate with my father, I did pick up, right, my father's addiction to gambling, and it was directly I chose that addiction, right? It was a calming system for me in a time that I was nervous. I had just gotten married, right? And in that uncomfortableness, right? I needed that coping mechanism. And I wanted to stay thin and skinny for my husband. So I picked up gambling. And my dad was a big gambling addict and a big gambling addict. And, because of that attachment with my father, and because my father did it, and if my father did it, and I loved him, and he was a good man, right? I chose that as one, just one. I've had so many, and I'm grateful. They just, you know, and some of these addictions that I had, like smoking, the first time I tried to quit smoking, and oh my goodness, I'd go to bed at night and I'd wake up in the morning after saying the night before that was my last cigarette. The first thing I would do is I would have a cigarette, right? And I didn't smoke for long. I maybe 10, 10, 15 years, right? I didn't start smoking till I was 27 years old. Started smoking so that I could lose weight. It wasn't the smoking that helped me lose the weight, but and if you don't know, I made it up to 311 pounds and I lost 160 pounds. Eventually, I quit smoking after starting smoking just to keep the weight off. And it ended up being a 10, 15-year habit for me. And, right, I never tried quitting. I lots of times I'd say, "Oh, this is my last cigarette. I'm not gonna, right? Tomorrow morning, that's it. I'm not having a cigarette. I've quit." But I never did, right? I never did. So I can't even say that I tried. In my mind, I tried, but not in the action. But the thing is, the first time I actually did try to quit, I just quit. That was it. And I never had another cigarette ever again. I am grateful that, I didn't pick up other really, really bad, unmanageable, right? When we say unmanageable, but you know what it's like with that fentanyl or heroin or, in my day, I worked in nightclubs and bars, right? When I worked there, it was cocaine that was the big thing. Oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine if I had gotten hooked on stuff like that. And people do all the time. And I can't imagine how I would have ever been able to better my life in any way, right? To understand a little bit about what I was doing to my life in these coping mechanisms that I wouldn't even had a chance, right? I wouldn't even have made it to my first lesson in that. There wouldn't have been a chance for me at all. And that first time I tried to quit smoking, I quit smoking. Lots of times with my gambling, I would go home just bawling my eyes out because I spent the rent or the bill money or right, grocery money. Couldn't even put gas in the car. I wasn't contributing to my household. I was letting my husband contribute to the household and it wreaked havoc in my life. It destroyed, literally, it destroyed my marriage. And even when after it destroyed my marriage, I still gambled because I needed that coping mechanism more than ever at that point. It was another untruth that I took into my system. And when I said, uh, I quit. And the first time I actually was able to get off of those machines, even for just a week, that was the last time I touched those machines. At that point, right, I was on my journey. That was, right, something I was very, very proud of. It's been 6 years now since I've stopped gambling. But there were other things. I was a big ice cruncher and I ruined my teeth, right? Totally trashed my teeth. Today I went to the dentist and only went to the dentist because, right, Canada came up with a dental plan for us and they're paying 100%. Well, what I thought was 100%. It's going to be about $2,400 altogether. I only have to come up with $400 and right, I'll be able to have all that work done. But today was my first appointment. She said it's going to take a month for four different appointments. I'm not a big fan of the scrapers with the getting the tartar off and stuff, but you do what you got to do. And that gift, right? That this Can you imagine? And there were a lot of people put on this program, and this program were for low income families and low income individuals because, right, I am considered low income in the moment. They, right, invited me into the program. I didn't even have to apply. Well, I applied. I was invited to apply though. And as soon as I got that insurance card, I was at it. But I can imagine, because this is an offer for all Canadians. And I can imagine, even the dentist said she's been so busy with this new insurance program, and it's such a gift. I am so grateful to, right? And in talking about what a great country I am, it's right what I can do in that little drummer girl moment, in my contribution to what I could do in a little bit of payback, right? I was actually even thinking of posting something on Instagram in a thank you, right? Because for me, it was a miracle, right? It was $2,500. It was on my goals for this year. But, right, after I quit that job that was putting the roof over my head, there wasn't anything more going into that kitty to get my teeth done. Okay, so let's get back on to the main branch of the tree. Just to say first that there were lots of addictions. Oh my goodness. I was addicted to Halls, which is a cough drop, and it was the menthol and the eucalyptus that I got addicted to. It was one of those things that destroyed my teeth. Also, I got addicted to crunching ice, again destroying my teeth. And these were things that they were with me for, oh my goodness, years. I think I got up to about 4 packages of Halls a day. And I didn't suck on these Halls. I crunched them. I ground them with my teeth. And pure sugar, along with the eucalyptus, along with the menthol, and I was hooked on that. I have to also say my mother was hooked on the beech trees, which is a black licorice candy, which also I think also has some of those addictive qualities, are ingredients in them. But the first time I tried to quit, even after they were with me for at least a couple of years, right? And realization of what it was doing to me, um, I was just able, cold turkey, to just quit. The only thing I never truly got a handle on, even though I did lose lots of weight, and right, I'm not 311 pounds anymore. Um, but food is something you can't live without. So that one I am always up and down in. And again, in that upbringing that I had, it's a problem that me and all my sisters have, up and down, up and down. And it's terrible on the system. You're either on a diet or we're eating like oink oink oinks, right? And I don't know why I did that, but that's exactly that's exactly true. Um, but for me, uh, it is something to pay attention to. That I was always using something to help calm my system down in getting rid of some of these untruths. And like I said, right, they could have been impacted, right, could have been purposely trained into me. This is part of my upbringing. But sometimes it's just in our misunderstandings, and sometimes our fears, and sometimes it's in our own upbringing that we pass these things down into our kids. And because you got two parents doing this, and remember, you got grandparents and cousins, and right, and so you're going to have all kinds of different religions, you're going to have all different kinds of political ideas, you're going to have all different cultures, right? And this is something that is becoming more acceptable, right, in the world. But I believe this is the route that we're supposed to be going, is right. It does take all kinds to make the world, and we have to better accept, and right, and better understand ourselves so that we can understand others and accept others, recognizing that those others have parts of them imprinted into us, right? We are an amalgamation. I am an amalgamation of my two parents. And I would like to say, oh, I'm my father's daughter. I'm my father's daughter. But I had just like those beech tree drops, cough drops, right? I did the holes. It was in that same relation to that. But for me, by that time, and I was deep in it at that time, not woke up to any ideas, and my marriage was falling apart without even me knowing it, right? That that negative part of me, right? It got attached to something that was not good for me. And again, my father's addiction was not good for me. My mother's addictions were not good for me, but they were still all coping mechanisms. They were all, right? Like the pink ice donuts with the sprinkles, you know? Who's to say? It's not like I'm stopping right in this moment. I am on a diet, right? And I'm doing okay with that. I'm actually doing pretty good on that. But you know what? It's not something I've resolved, right? Maybe I have. I've only been on this diet for a week, but a year from now, maybe we'll have this conversation and said, "Oh my goodness, I just said that's it. I'm on a diet, changing my eating habits and right? And it sticks." But the thing is, like I said, food is something you really can't go without, can you? Right? You could probably drink those protein shakes, but what kind of fun is that? Food is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be enjoyed with others. Like even in my family, we all sat at the table. That was a rule. Dinner was at 5 o'clock, and we were all at the table together. It was very important for my dad to keep up what was going on with his family because he was always away, and because he worked the night shifts when he wasn't fishing, he would work night shifts driving cabs. That one tradition, right, was important, and it was a way to keep tabs on his kids, keep tabs on his wife, so that he was always knowing what was going on with us, what troubles we were having, right? And, he would come up with solutions. And his solution for me was Mother Nature, right? And it was a gift. And again, you know part of those understandings in my life is that truth. It wasn't an untruth. This was a truth, because I understand how Mother Nature impacts me. I went for 2 walks today. I walked home from the dentist, which was 6 miles, and I came home tonight, did some messaging, right? And then I was ready for another walk. And then I walked another couple of miles tonight, and I went for coffee and right, came home, and I got another walk in today, and I'm so grateful because I'm back to that state where I can walk forever. It took going for a walk every single night for a couple of weeks because I hadn't been walking. I was so deep in the lessons. I was just glued, right, in my thought leadership, and I was glued into the lessons. I was glued also. And I have to say, when we talk about coping mechanism, right, some of my joys, some of my passions, my Mother Nature videos. And again, that was a truth that I grew up with, and it serves me so well. And my love for my metal detecting videos, my bottle digging videos, and my history documentaries, these calm my system now. And yes, they're coping mechanisms too. But these are coping mechanisms that serve, right? And the why they serve is because now I understand that I can pick and choose for myself a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? Understanding it takes all kinds to make the world. And there are all kinds out there. And if I can give that respect and tolerance to somebody who is different than me, that is unique in their own understandings. Tomorrow, I'm meeting up with a lady. She is a devout Christian. She's an absolute sweetheart. I've known her for years. Her son was a co-worker of mine and a good friend. And if you hung out with me and you know me at all, I'm not going to say I'm not big, right? I just don't have those close relationships in my life. But she is one that I have kept in my life, and I've been meaning to get together with her since I've left my job. Right, I've only seen her once, and I went over to spend a little time with her over the Christmas holidays. But I gave her a message tonight, and I said, you know what? Let's go get a cup of coffee and right spend some time together. I knew she had Saturdays off, so I'm not working tomorrow. I don't have plans until the evening, so we're getting together tomorrow. And she's devout Christian, and she respects me. She understands who I am. Like, I don't lay it on like butter, right? But mindset is a part of me now, right? And mindset is foundations for good values and ways to connect and interact with people who are different from you, right? And she does that too, but she does that through her belief in Jesus and being a Christian. And I love her to death. And she cares for me too, right? She wouldn't keep messaging me and connecting with me if she didn't have that consideration for me. And we have mindsets talk. We talked a little bit tonight about narcissism. And again, when I we're talking about assimilation, right? We're talking about synthesis, which is a combination of lots, combination of a few to make up the whole, right? That's exactly what I'm talking about because she's accepting me for who I am. I'm accepting her for who she is, and I'm letting her rub up close to me, and she's letting me rub up close to her, and we're using those baseline values, right? To be friends, to better understand each other, to better respect each other, to better tolerate what might not be a belief for ourselves. And that's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. And this is, I think, a way of going about, right? Because we're going to need to figure something out. Otherwise, we are going to butt heads with our neighbor, not literally the neighbor across the world, but the neighbor who's standing next to us, who's also allowing themselves to be influenced by, right, political ideas, religious ideas, familial, cultural, and right, and different, but because maybe that's their homeland or their parents' homeland that they're taking, and plus the traditions of it being passed down from one generation to another. This is them. But that doesn't mean they have to be put off to a corner, or I have to be put off to a corner, or I need to be rejected, or somebody else needs to be rejected. We pull it in and we move together, even if it's just for a little while. And we move together with those baseline values, right? I talk the mindset, but it's okay because mindset is something that is relatable to all in honest truth. And it doesn't matter what religious, political, cultural, right, ideas that you might have. If you're a person that wants to move forward, right, that you want a better life for your children and your children's children, right, and in that understanding that we're this close right now to everybody in the world, right, that you'd want to do better by yourself and others, right? And sometimes we just have to start with the tolerance because we haven't gotten those untruths out of our systems yet. But if we can start with tolerance and have these kind of conversations, right, then we can build that baseline of values where we can all, right, mix and live and interact and marry and have children with and pass that down from generation to generation. Just that one idea that each one of us is unique. And even though mommy's a Christian and daddy is spiritual, or mommy's Buddhist, or Buddhist, and dad's a Hare Krishna, that we're all going to be able to respect each other's choices, respect each other's perspectives, and no longer drill into each other, right, our truths, which might be an untruth. But because we have that authority, because we have that right as a parent to teach our children what we choose to teach them. Don't tell me how to, right, bring up my kids. It's going to have to be in our choices. It's going to have to be. And it's starting already. It really is. Right? Things are not the way they were. We're not segregated from each other. And a lot of these ideas, it's not like they're being rejected, though sometimes they are, but it's just an understanding that some of these ideas just don't work anymore. It's just not acceptable anymore, right? And then to bring it back home, and then because we are being tolerant and respectful and working with those values with others, that we're able to, right, talk, we're able to work together to better find solutions. Okay, I'm not sure if that's what I wanted to yibber yabber about in this word synthesis, but I think we're moving into a world that's going to require us to assimilate, to amalgamate, and to better make choices for ourselves rather than being dictated by one party or more, lots of times, right? Right? Christians usually marry Christians. So more than likely you would have been born a Christian, right? Or you were one parent or both parents were spiritual. So yes, you'll grow up to be spiritual, but they're still going to have different ideas in just because of their own personalities, because of that nurturing when they grew up, right? In those coping mechanisms that we just passed down from one generation to another. But if we can work in values, right, then maybe some of these bad habits, these misunderstandings, right, won't be passed down. And wouldn't that be amazing that we could just live our lives and, you know, I'm addicted to motivation and inspiration and, you know, I love what I love. It's a part of me, but I don't expect, excuse me. I don't expect anybody else to delve in like I do because, right, it's not a passion for them. But that's okay. They have their own passions, right? And if we want to kind of hang out together, just that mutual respect, that mutual understanding, and those mutual values that we can decide, right? Right? Just say, this is my boundary. This doesn't work for me. And that person says, oh, okay, I understand that. Well, this doesn't work for me. Are you good with that? And then we just have these better understandings how not to agitate, frustrate, make people angry, make people not want to be around us, right? But do it in a truthful way, in a genuine way, and not just, right, just pass the buck, right? This is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. This is the way I was brought up. Grandpa did this. That we can all use our own noodles and our own hearts to be able to feel feel out a truth for ourselves. And if it's a truth for ourselves and not a truth for anybody else, that's okay, right? That's okay. It's just in that mutual respect and tolerance and understanding that, you know, it takes time. It really does take time, but it only takes one person, right, to get it started. Okay, you guys, that's it for me tonight. That's it for me for this week. And like I said, if you want to pop in Sunday, my week is over now. I'm taking a day off tomorrow. Saturdays is my day to do whatever I like. And tomorrow I'm spending some time with a friend I haven't seen since Christmas. And I'm really looking forward to it. And like I said, she's very different from me, but she's an absolute sweetheart and we handle each other with care. I handle her with care. I would never disrespect her. I would never, right, make her truths an untruth because she gives me that same kind of respect, right? Maybe some way or somewhere down the road, things will change, right? There's always growth, We're always changing, and maybe it'll change for the better in our relationship. But maybe there will be that wedge. But in that wedge, there'll be lessons in how to do it better next time. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. Let's see what Eugene says. Thunderstorm in Brunswick County, Virginia, at Freeman, Virginia. Really, I love the thunderstorms. I think I might Google that before I go to bed and see if there's any live footage going on so I can see myself, Eugene. Eugene, maybe we'll see you Sunday. If I don't see you Sunday, we'll see you Monday. Everybody, have a great night.